we do need every kid to develop explorer skills because of the world they're going into, because of ChatGPT, generative AI, and they will be inheriting a world where they need to be able to curate their environment and all the tools that are out there, and to be able to nimbly navigate the path that they want to pursue. And they won't really be in a position to succeed if what they need, which is what we heard from so many achiever kids, they needed somebody else to tell them exactly what to do it right. Because we are in a wide new world here. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows what they're doing.
How this is going to unfold. They need explore skills.
Welcome back to Wise on Air, the show where we talk to the world's leading minds on the future of education. This is Bassem Hijazi, producer of the show. What if I told you that while parents think 60% of teens love school, by 12th grade, only 25% actually do? Host and CEO of Wise, Stavros Yanuka, explores this alarming disconnect with our guest, Rebecca Winthrop, the Senior Fellow and Director of the Center for Universal Education at Brookings. In her book, The Disengaged Teen, Helping Kids Learn Better, Feel Better, and Live Better, which recently launched and featured at Oprah Daily, Rebecca and her co-author Jenny Anderson share insights from hundreds of interviews conducted with students, parents, and educators. They identify 4 distinct modes of engagement that shape how teens approach learning, and more importantly, provide practical strategies to help teens develop what they call explorer muscles, one of the crucial skills needed to navigate an increasingly complex world. Let's jump to Stavros to kick off the conversation, and to learn about how to purchase the book, be sure to visit RebeccaWinthrop.com through the link in the description.
Rebecca, welcome back to Wise on Air.
Lovely to be here, Stavros. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. Let me start by asking you what prompted you to write this book. What's the key motivation here?
The motivation for me was actually rather personal. I have 2 boys, and during COVID, I thought one of them would sail through with at-home learning and the other would struggle mightily. One had kind of sailed through school, had always gotten perfect grades, didn't seem to try that hard, found school easy, and I thought, oh, he'll be fine. I don't have to worry about him. And I was worried about my other son, who was younger and had just gotten diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD and really was struggling in school. And I thought, oh, he'll need a lot of help and attention. And I was totally wrong, actually. My older son, the minute it went pass fail, he said to me, well, if it's, not measured, it doesn't count. I don't see why I should study. And I said, what? It's, you have to learn. It's about learning. And I realized he really had very little motivation. And I didn't see that. It was sort of masked by good grades. And my younger son blossomed. He loved sort of being able to go at his own pace, not comparing himself to other kids. And he just was super engaged in learning in the right environment. And I thought, well, for me, I've worked in education my whole life. It's super hard to assess which child is engaged. I can't imagine for parents who don't have an education background, how hard it is, and knowing how important engagement is to kids' learning and success in school and really life. I became very concerned and was thrilled that my co-author Jenny Anderson came onto the project too.
So engagement really is the heart of the book, right? And maybe we should maybe just spend a little bit of time defining it. What do we mean by it? And I know this is a kind of a bit of a silly question, but you alluded to its importance to education and learning. Maybe elaborate a little bit more about why that is the case, and why should we really care about it?
This is not a silly question. It sounds on the surface of it, of course, if kids are disengaged, that seems bad. But when I delved deeply into the research with the team who was doing all this work together with me and with my colleague Jenny, we really started to realize how important engagement really is. I don't think I don't think even I sufficiently realized how essential it is. So
Mm.
basically, how engaged a young person is the thing, and there's reams of research on this, decades of research between their learning environment. It could be a parent advice and guidance at home, it could be a teacher in a classroom, it could be a coach on a sports field, it could be peers in outside of school. Whatever the learning environment is, how engaged the kid is what will come out the other side. And it shows up in terms of levels of engagement. The more engaged a kid is, the more they attend school, the more they complete school, the more they go on to higher education, the more pro-social behavior they have, the better grades they have, the better achievement and skills they have. I mean, it's just a huge list.
Mhm.
Better mental health they have.
Yeah.
So it really is almost like the foundation of learning well.
And in terms of sort of definitions, how should we think about it? I mean, obviously there's an element of turning up, paying attention. Do we think about it in terms of how invested the child is
Right.
in the process of learning? Is that a good way to conceptualize it?
Right. This is where I think things get tricky. Um, in the academic world, there are many, many measures of different dimensions of student engagement. And in the academic world, engagement is a multidimensional construct. What that means is there's a couple parts to it.
Yeah.
So the ones that we have really leaned in on are behavioral engagement, like you said. Kids turn up to school, they go to school, they do their homework, they do as they're told when in class. They sit, they face forward, they listen, they're not interrupting. That's
Yeah.
sort of basic behavioral engagement. That's very easy for teachers and parents to see. And actually, the adults in kids' lives are a better assessor of behavioral engagement than kids themselves, who might say, yeah, of course, I'm always listening in class, even though they might not 100% always be listening.
Yeah.
But then there's other dimensions of engagement, which actually you have to ask the kids, and adults have a really hard time accurately assessing. That is emotional engagement. When kids are there, are they interested in what they're learning? Are they excited? Are they enthusiastic? Does it make them happy? Are they, or not just happy, but curious, etc.? You can think of a wide range of emotions that you have had when you're learning something interesting, right? So that's another
Yeah.
dimension. A third dimension is cognitive engagement. So are kids doing deeper learning strategies? So are they actually connecting what they're learning to things in their life or to other
Yeah.
classes? Are they really trying to think through and make sense of it? And you see that in persistence. If they run into a problem, do they take a step back and try a different tack and keep going? So that's that sort of cognitive engagement piece, which is really important for kids to really develop the skills we want them to develop. And then the last dimension that we've really brought into this picture, which people don't always bring in, but we think is quite important, is agentic engagement, which is you can be behaviorally, emotionally, cognitively engaged in school and be receiving instructions and doing exactly as you are told, following the instructions exactly right, which is in itself, in a large frame, passive or compliant. Now, agentic engagement is when kids start shaping the learning environment to make it work better for them. So they receive instructions and they say, oh, I'd really like to work on this with a buddy. Let me ask the teacher. Or, oh, I am going to go do my paper on, the deep sea because I'm super interested in the deep sea. I'm going to go ask my teacher. Or, they start finding ways to sort of shape what's available to them to make the learning environment work better for them. And that's
Got
where
it.
we actually see kids who are able to do that, they really can perform well, and they are also they enjoy school much more.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like it's almost there's a spectrum of engagement where at one extreme end you've got complete disengagement. And then at the other, you get to this level of, as you call it, agentic engagement,
Right.
where you're beginning to take control of your own learning
Yeah.
because you're so interested, because you're so
Yeah.
excited and
Yeah.
engaged
Yeah.
with the content. And I think in the book you introduce these archetypes, right, based on levels of engagement. Do you want to maybe say a little bit
Yeah.
about those?
Yeah, and the reason we did this was because we were playing around with this kind of wonky stuff, multidimensional construct of engagement, which is how engagement people who research this in academia talk about it, and the four sort of dimensions of engagement I just talked about: behavioral, emotional, cognitive, agentic. It's sort of hard to see, and also there's more that academia talks about, and we just felt that it was hard to grab. If you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're a student, it's a little hard to hold on to and grab. And really, from all the research we'd done, and we did a lot, and we can talk about that, what we found was these four sort of archetypes emerging that were a lot easier for people to hold on to and see, and then do something about. We have these four modes of engagement. One mode is kids who are kind of in passenger mode. And these are the kids who show up, they're behaviorally engaged. They're kind of coasting along. They're not necessarily emotionally invested in their learning. They might like school because they like to see their friends, but they're basically just behaviorally engaged. And that is most kids, actually, especially once they hit adolescence. Then you have kids who are really in achiever mode. They are behaviorally engaged, definitely cognitively engaged. Some of them are super enjoying it, feeling good, feeling quite interested, and emotionally engaged. And that's positive and that's good. However, we did find that this category, surprisingly, has the worst mental health outcomes, because these kids are actually trying really hard to be perfect, stressed out if they fail. They're quite fragile learners. They don't necessarily want to take a risk because they might, what if it jeopardizes how well they're doing? And they're really focused on, again, a little bit like my son was focused on, the purpose is the grade, not the purpose is the skills and content I'm learning. And of course, parents and teachers we love our achievers, but we would say, you do actually need to look out for them. And surprisingly, they aren't the top of the engagement mountain. You have kids who have more agency on sort of two ends of the spectrum. You have the third archetype is resistors, kids who are in resistor mode. And they have a lot of agency. They are acting as class clown, disrupting class, talking to their friend, going to the bathroom for long periods of time, skipping school, not doing their homework. Everyone knows them. They are often seen as the problem children, and I say that in quotes, because really they're just using their voice to try to tell the adults in the room and they just don't have the proper language. This isn't working for me. And they do have a lot of agency. It's just pointed away from their learning. And then the fourth dimension or mode is explorer mode. And that's when kids do have that agentic engagement and are really invested in their learning and able to sort of have a sense of what they're interested in. So they have to have some self-awareness so that they can sort of shape what is on offer in the environment to their interests.
And so explorer mode it sounds to me, is where you want to end up, right? In terms of, well, ideal archetype, but ideal environment that nurtures that outcome. So I have a couple of questions. One, do we have an example of a school or a program that does that really well? And then I guess second part of the question is around is there one way of getting to an explorer mode, or are there multiple pathways that can get you there to fit different interests, different personality types and all that?
So the first part of the question is, is there an example where kids are in explore mode? Absolutely. And we interviewed close to 100 kids for young people for this book research over the last 3 years from all walks of life. And we found a number of young people who were in resistor mode um, and kind of stuck there, like a little bit of resistor mode sometimes if the situation calls for it, like there's bullying or something, is appropriate. But kids who are really kind of stuck in resistor mode, and then they switched schools or had a different learning environment, and they jumped very quickly, actually, right into explorer mode. I'll name a couple of schools. The Met, we talked, one of the characters in the book is a young boy named Matteo, who's at the Met in Providence, which is a big picture learning school. And he was really, really disconnected and disengaged in middle school. He was actually a kid who was quite bright and wasn't challenged and found it very boring. So he could kind of ace his classes. And so he sort of fell in with the wrong crowd just because he was bored to tears. And he started skipping school and was getting into a lot of trouble. And then went to the Met, which is a big picture learning school, as I said, which is this network of schools that in high school, they are in school doing classes 3 days a week. And then for the entire 4 years, 2 days a week, they're doing workplace learning. And they pick the type of things they're interested in. And so 2 days a week, they're on site in a workplace learning something. And they learn all sorts of skills and competencies, and they debrief about them. So it could be a sort of, I remember visiting a big picture learning school, and one kid was working at a restaurant and was like, oh, this isn't, they're internships, this isn't, I guess I don't like, she had liked food, and I definitely don't want to work at a restaurant. This isn't for me, but I'm learning how to do customer service. I'm really learning about time management. I'm learning about how to do conflict mediation. Like she learned so many of these 21st century skills we want. You don't need to learn them through an academic subject in a classroom. In some ways, they're better on site. And so Matteo really came to love technology and computers, and had a whole host of incredible internships and just blossomed. And at the end of his 4 years, got a big, hefty scholarship from Amazon. He got awarded a full ride for college for their Amazon Future Engineers program. So we found many examples like that. And there are schools out there, they are not the norm in the US in particular, or nor in any country that I've met, who are doing this type of work. And one of my takeaways is we really should bring those types of approaches into the mainstream.
So maybe let's zoom in a little bit on before we get to that second question. Let's maybe just zoom a little on what does the school do well beyond, say, okay, 2 days a week, you guys get to do work, a workplace experience, or, how do they, do they provide a sort of a structure, a framework, some kind of, how do they approach this beyond just creating space for this to happen?
I would say in all the schools that we looked at, big picture learning types of models being one, they had a very strong emphasis on belonging in relationships. So it was not just that there was this internship experience. They had a group of, they would have core advisory where a cohort of young people stay with their little group all 4 years with the same teacher, who really get to know them, who care about them, who have their backs, who have their, have them on, I'm going like this, mobile phones. Students talked about texting their advisor, when they would get in a scrape with their boyfriend or their parent, or, just all the emotional stuff that happens in adolescence. There's many big emotions, and they can get in the way of sort of learning and development and sort of shunt kids on the wrong path. And advisors played a huge role in spotting kids' strengths and interests. So kids don't always, it's not like, oh, you just throw kids in the deep end, follow your interests. Kids, don't know what's out there. So there's a whole role in exposing them to things and then talking through what catches them and giving them feedback around, you seem really passionate. There was another great character of an advisor, a young woman who had really wanted she liked clothes, so she was doing her internship, this another big picture learning school, and in a thrift store. She loved it. She was getting kind of bored, and her advisor noticed that she was really passionate about social justice, sort of in her social media, in her conversation, in the hallways, but she never thought about it as a career. She had come from a family where she really didn't have that at home, the idea of what her career path options could be. And her advisor said, you could have a career around this. And one thing and the next, she ended up with a internship at the mayor's office and blossomed and is, now off on a path. So there's a whole range of things that these schools do. So relationships, for sure, abilities and space to follow your interests. And it's not, kids don't just randomly pick like in the big picture learning model, there's an entire system, like they have to be approved, the workplaces, they have to be mentoring. The internship supervisor has to really be up for mentoring young people. That's not everybody. So it's not just throw them, in the deep end and see how it goes. There's a whole structure behind it. And then making sure that they get their academic content and, that they are, mastering the content that they need in their classes that they could then apply and use in real life experiences. Those are kind of the three elements that seem to be similar across the different models. So there's not just one model, one way to do it. There's a wide range, but those are three of sort of the main principles.
So this is really not about sacrificing, learning attainment and acquisition of knowledge and skills. And
absolutely
substituting
not.
For work
absolutely
experience.
Not. If anything, I would say some of the best models are, have high standards, rigorous academically, and then use that academic knowledge and give space for kids to try to apply that knowledge to solve real world problems, rather than wait 4 years, get your academic knowledge, and then when you're 18, go forth and try to apply it for real world problems. If you go into the workforce or, some sort of hybrid higher ed work thing, if you're going straight to higher education, some higher education institutions, then it's, that is deferred yet again.
And so to go back to the second part of my question, which is there one template for explorer mode? And we've talked about, embedding, real world experience, and are there other approaches that might work for different personality types?
Right. What I would say is, it's not that explore mode in terms of what kids are doing. Like Mateo was really into coding and computer science and tech. Like it's not that it has to be, it doesn't look the same in each kid, but the way kids feel when they're doing it, and the way they're using these deep learning strategies and really mastering skills is the same, and the way they're taking initiative, like putting ideas out on what they want to do to learn better, is the same. And so I think those are the things that characterize explore mode. The pathways to get there, which is maybe what you're getting at, can be very, very different depending on where kids get stuck. So what we found is actually you can kind of go in and out of these 4 modes in one day. You could love we have a character, Stella, who loved her French class and loved her teacher and was a total achiever, wanted to do really well. Hated her chemistry class and teacher and was in total resistor mode, refused to listen because made things worse for her, etc. And then kind of was passenger the rest of the time. And then outside of school was super into explore mode around her passions and interests, which were around kids and child development. And she did a lot of, playing with kids, teaching camps, swim lessons, coming up with new ideas of how to teach kids. We can all sort of, go in and out of these modes. I go in and out of them a little bit. Like I don't love my budget meetings, and I'm
You
try
don't?
to keep my eye, try to keep my eye on the prize for, top line. And I get, a little coasty when it comes to all the whole Excel spreadsheets. So it's not that kids can't be in these different modes at different times. It's more when they get stuck. So we did find that kids sort of would often get stuck and have like a passenger identity. Like, I'm not going to try because I'm not good at school. Or a resistor identity. Like, the only way I know how to deal with these big emotions and it could be many reasons. Kids could be resisting because they feel a sense of they don't belong. We talked to a lot of kids who, were, for example, kids of color, Black or brown kids in majority white schools who really struggled to feel a sense of belonging. Or it could be that they're resisting because they're really behind. They have they're neurodivergent or have a learning disability and they can't quite get it and they're not getting the supports they need. And so it feels better not to try and they're very frustrated, right? Same with achiever mode. You get kids stuck in achiever mode and they're like, well, I'm the perfect student. I get all A's. And the minute they get a bad grade, they collapse. So it's more, how do you get kids who get stuck in these different modes? How do you help them become more nimble and spend at least some time in explorer mode? We would say, like, my co-author and I would say, we want kids to at least once a day be in explorer mode. It could be in school, it could be out of school. It doesn't have to be in every class at every time. There are times when they won't be, that they're just going to actually have to sit down, learn the material and take the test. But there will be different pathways when kids are stuck in these different archetypes. So a kid stuck in resistor mode needs a sense of belonging and support, and also possibly envisioning a future for themselves. We talk about this idea of seeing a potential future self for themselves. A kid in passenger mode often needs to really be connected to their interests, so they sort of get a spark. And a kid in achiever mode get really stuck often needs a little more downtime and reflection time, and to know that they matter even if their grades aren't perfect, but also to get in touch, a little space to get in touch with where their real interests are, because they don't usually have a lot of time to reflect about that. They're so busy responding to what people ask them to do.
I mean, there's so much to unpack there that I almost don't know where to begin. But I guess, I had a sort of underlying concern behind some of my questions, which is that we don't replace one, archetype of what a good student ought to be, which traditionally has been the achiever one, right? It's the one that tries really hard and always strives to get the top grades, that we don't suddenly take that and replace it with, the self-motivated, learner, and we expect everyone to be that all the time again, right? Because I mean, different people have different preferences in terms of how they engage. And I'm in some ways relieved to hear that at least the book acknowledges that you will go through different cycles. A lot will depend on sort of pre-existing levels of interest in a topic. For example, your example of budgeting, I don't know how one, jazzes up budgeting to make it interesting.
I'm just never going to love it. And that's okay.
You may never get there, right? And that's
I
okay.
am not a CFO. I never will be. I've been at this for a lot. And I think part of what we want the 4 modes of engagement to do is to be a tool for parents to help coach their kids on how to be better learners. And there will be times, there will be the class, which is the equivalent of my budget meetings. And I should give a shout out to my Brookings budget team, because it is not them. It is not personal. They are great.
Yes.
I've never liked budget meetings. I just like every time I see the Excel spreadsheet with the rows of numbers, I just sort of like fall asleep. So there will be classes where you parents should be like, you know what? Why don't you take on a passenger mode for this? Just get through it. And that is actually advice to a kid who's stuck in achiever mode, because it is almost impossible to be full achiever 100% of the time on everything, which is where the
Yeah.
sort of stress, anxiety, mental health, and then you can't do it, and depression, and a whole bunch of things that we don't want for our children. Like I would personally, as a mom, rather have a happy passenger than an achiever with serious mental health
Yeah.
problems. And so we can help that achiever say, you know, in this class, you seem to be doing fine. Like just go into passenger mode, get it done, and don't worry too much about it, and go to bed. Don't sacrifice your sleep. We do need every kid to develop explorer skills because of the world they're going into, because of ChatGPT, generative AI, and
Yeah.
they will be inheriting a world where they need to be able to curate their environment and all the tools that are out there, and to be able to nimbly navigate the path that they want to pursue. They will not be able to go out
Coast.
into world coast. They won't be able to coast,
Mm.
and they won't really be in a position to succeed if what they need, which is what we heard from so many achiever kids, they needed somebody else to tell them exactly what to do it right. Because
Yeah.
we are in a wide new world here. Nobody
Yeah.
nobody knows
Nobody knows what
how
they're
this is
doing. Yeah.
how this is going to unfold. They need
Yeah.
explorer skills. There's no way to be an explorer 100% of the time in your day, but we found that kids were, we did this massive survey with our partner Transcend, and kids said that they had the opportunity to be in explorer mode less than 10% of the time in school.
Yeah.
This is over 65,000 kids, 3rd through 12th grade. So that is not enough.
So let's talk a little bit about, schools and teachers. I want to get to parents.
Yeah.
But before we go there, let's maybe talk about teachers and schools, right?
Yep.
What can they do to get that balance right and have more explorer mode opportunities made available for their students?
They can do a lot, and all the teachers we talk to want to do a lot. And so let's separate schools from teachers. Teachers, and we interviewed many. And this research built on a lot of the Brookings research that we've done, where we interviewed 25,000 teachers across 10 countries. Teachers really feel squished in the middle. They feel pressure from the top, the administration, school policy around standards, getting every kid to a certain level, et cetera. And then they feel pressure from the bottom, which is parents and community saying, I want you to, educate my kid exactly like this or that. And teachers feel pretty stuck. And I would say they are not making it up. They are often stuck. There are absolutely things that teachers in that sort of squished in the middle situation can do. There are great autonomy supportive teaching strategies that have at least 20 years of randomized controlled trial evidence behind them to show that they, with small tweaks to style, so it doesn't really change the type of teacher. You don't need to change your classroom management. You can still be strict, you can still have strong classroom management, because that's something teachers care about. Well, if agentic engagement is there going to be chaos in the classroom, which is never good. And it's more in style. There's small tweaks teachers can make. For example, and this comes out of research from John Marshall Reeve and many of his colleagues who have really pioneered this. Teachers can start a lesson, say it's photosynthesis, and you can say, hey guys, this is the topic, this is what we're talking about. Here's the variety of things we're going to cover today. And then they can ask the question, where do you guys want to start the discussion? Just that simple question. It makes kids have to look within, think a little bit about what's sparking interest to them, So that's one small thing. Another
Yeah.
small, again, small change to style. When they assign homework, they can give 2 to 3 options. Again, not 25 options, but a small number of options. Here's 3 different things you can do for this homework assignment, and kids can choose. Again, that just makes kids have to look inside and say, "Ooh, which one would I like?" It's just sort of bringing forward the opportunity to agentically engage. It's opening that space a little bit. And then there's a host of other things like that, which are, you know, take practice, but they aren't wildly revolutionary. Like, you don't need to
Yeah.
upend the system. And that really shows kids succeed much better. They get better grades when that happens, because they're more agentically
Yeah.
engaged. And then there's this upward cycle. Kids who are agentically engaged, teachers see their spark, see their interest, see them trying to sort of pull things into their learning, and then they give them more space. So there's this virtuous cycle, and they say, oh, when they give them more choices, so then kids have more opportunity to lean in on things they're interested. So they do it more and better, and it's just this sort of virtuous upward cycle. So that's teachers. I know you wanted to talk about schools too.
No, I mean, no, I think there's, I mean, just a quick follow on teachers. I mean, do you feel that teachers would benefit from kind of professional development in this area? Do we need to be talking, for example, to teacher training institutes or graduate schools of education to sort of embed some of these ideas, practices into their curriculum?
Yes, I would say yes, yes, and yes.
Okay.
Virtually, the vast majority of teachers I've ever spoken to have gone into teaching because they love the idea of sparking learning in kids. And that is exciting for them. So teachers want kids who are engaged. And then when you get in and there's all these, teachers start feeling bogged down and they feel like they don't even have autonomy themselves. It can be very hard for teachers. So teachers want to teach engaged kids. And I think that a lot of these practices should be absolutely part and parcel of every pre-service. They should be part of in-service teacher training. They should be discussions in the school with school leadership supporting them. And I also think that a lot of teachers, struggle to wrap their hands around the concept of engagement across the multiple dimensions. I think we certainly interviewed a number of teachers who said, gosh, when I really got into teaching, I thought that behavioral engagement was sort of an engaged student. They're there, they're present, they're paying attention, they're taking instruction. And you do want that for a certain extent, but it masks this hidden emotional and cognitive engagement, agentic engagement you can see a bit more often. And so I think teachers also need these 4 modes for themselves, so they can start seeing where their kids are at and can start thinking about how to help their kids get into explore mode a little bit each day. Maybe not every lesson. You don't need every teacher to do it every lesson, but we certainly want at least once a day a kid to have an opportunity somewhere, somehow.
And then what about sort of, school and even sort of system level changes that you'd want to see, right? Because if, again, a lot of, if I'm a teacher and I have to, go through material and I need, X number of hours to do that. And then I'm also having to sort of figure out how do I create room for some of this agentic explorer mode opportunity, then that's where I can see there being a lot of tension potentially, right? If you're having to follow a curriculum that requires, X number of contact hours, right?
Right. Well, I think the things we just talked about, these subtle shifts in style, you can do in any curriculum with any lesson plan. So
Yeah.
I'm not so worried about teachers being able to do those subtle shifts and help
Yeah.
make some space in the classroom. But I think your bigger point is, and I would agree with it, that teachers alone cannot transform an ed system. There's so many structures that they have to fit in, that they need ed leaders, school leaders, district leaders, jurisdiction leaders to take this issue of disengagement on and to take it head on. And there's a lot of things over and above what a teacher has the actual power to do that should shift in education to make it more engaging for kids, and not because we want to entertain kids. Engagement is not the same as entertainment. I think people I find in discussions that gets confused, and it's not at all the same. And in fact, just giving sort of jelly beans and gold stars and points, is not going to engage kids any more than just telling them exactly what to do. So
not teenagers anyway, right?
Yeah, certainly. Toddlers is a different thing. Yeah,
Yes.
totally. But I mean, it will engage teenagers too. But the point is, it's a superficial engagement. It's not a meaningful engagement. And that's the difference between sort of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So there's a lot that can be done in systems to open up the structure of schooling, what some academics call the grammar of schooling, because a lot of schools look the same everywhere. Cohorts going through age-based, based on specific time, based on sort of set material that you need to cover, and seated in classroom learning experiences, some of which can be great, but you probably want to complement that with a different sort of in-school, out-of-school, hands-on, learn stuff, apply it, solve the problems. And at the back of the book, we provide a list of 14 organizations that work, certainly in the US, some around the world, with school systems and schools to try to restructure how to make school more engaging and in a way that would create more explore opportunities. And there's not just one way to do it. There's multiple ways, but those principles of relationships and developing academic knowledge and getting a chance to apply them are all there in all of those models.
No, great. Parents,
Yes.
you said the book is mainly targeted at parents. So for parents listening who are concerned, or even parents who simply want to ensure that their teen is as engaged as can be, what can they be doing to support this?
So first off, parents can do a lot. I was even surprised myself when going through the research how powerful parents are in shaping their kids' motivation and engagement in school and learning. And parents can't take the place of teachers at all, nor should they, and nor do they want to. We certainly all learned that from COVID. But they can be allies with teachers. And just think of it this way, like parents aren't going to know how to, teach algebra necessarily, but they can certainly talk to their kid about why algebra is important, or why learning math is important. And so a lot of what parents do, and I would say particularly once kids, this is sort of really once kids turn 10, 8, 9, 10 and above. So this is true, is modeling how exciting learning is. So, John Hattie has something called rather parents being your kid's first teacher, be your kid's first learner. So just modeling what you're learning and talking about it and why it's interesting, and engage and having conversations with kids about what you're interested in and what you're learning, and hearing what they're interested in and asking them questions. If there's one thing I would like, one shift that a parent can do today, which everyone can implement, it's, shifting the conversation when your kid gets home from school. You're like, how was school? Good. How did you do on your math test? Fine. You know, do you have any homework? Yes. You know, did you start? Which is a little more administrative and performative. Ask them about the content of what
Yeah.
they're learning.
Yeah.
You know, hey, what's going on in science class? And if they're like, nothing, oh, do you really mean nothing? Or why is that? Did you do nothing? Oh, no, well, we studied cell biology. Oh, I can't remember that. What are the whatever the content is.
No,
What are the parts of the cell?
yeah, that resonates actually. I mean, thinking back to when my kids were teens, and especially my son, the way to engage him was actually to get him to teach you.
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
he loved, explaining and now that he's an adult and sort of reflecting back, he will say that was actually my process for figuring the content out, was to
Yes.
try and explain it to you guys.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah,
And you've exactly taken one of the tips in our book. Like if you get nowhere or you don't remember anything about cell biology, which I'm always like, oh, well, I know I learned that and I don't remember it. You know, tell me about it. What is that? You know, you could play dumb. And
there was no play acting here. I mean, at least in my case.
yeah, me too.
Yes, I know cells are important, but
Yeah,
that's about it.
I have a lot of them. Um,
Yeah.
and this can also go to stuff around friendships, relationships, peer dynamics, right? So kids are learning and working things out through talking and discussion.
Well, I think parental engagement and interest in a topic, and sort of role modeling being the learner as a way of sort of engaging with
Yes.
kids on
Yeah.
on content.
Yeah.
And then I think we got into sort of friendship groups
Well, it's basically you
yeah.
can role model, making a mistake and apologizing at work and how you recover from it. It's basically engaging in the discussion with your kids.
Yeah.
Instead of what parents, and I do this myself, and catch myself doing it, so it's hard. We often go to command and control.
Yep.
Get your homework done. You have to go
Yeah.
to bed, supervision, and all the research shows that if you're just actually kids do worse in school if you're just acting on homework in command and control mode. They actually do worse. And part of it is because you're taking away their autonomy and agency to have, you're just like, do this, do this, do this. And kids are getting told what to do all the time in school. They have very little actual agency to make their own decisions. And that it seeps out their any sort of agency they would feel over it, and sense of pride in their own completion because someone is there sort of telling them what to do. We had one student say, I feel way better about myself and more proud when I get an 82 in my Spanish class than when I get a 95 and my mom has spent the entire night forcing me to study for it. There's some pride in your own competence.
Yeah.
So we go into command and control, or we go into fix it and solve. You had a problem with your friend. Well, this is what you should do. You should do this. Go back and tell her to do this, or ignore her, or whatever it is. And really, we just should listen and try to repeat back and talk through. If they listen, they might not want any solutions, but you can also start sharing how you've had that experience, what you did, etc. Because kids are adolescent development is talking and discussing is a big part of how they develop and learn. It's a developmental process.
So what do you say to parents who will say, and I've heard this a lot, both at home and elsewhere, they'll say, well, if I don't push, they just won't, they don't have the motivation. They don't have
Yep.
the, you know,
They won't do it.
They won't do
They
it.
won't get
Yeah.
their homework done. They'll fail the
Yeah.
test. Yep.
Yeah.
This is a tricky one, but we have come out on the side of you have to, in a low stakes environment. So maybe it's a weekly math test, not the end of the year, can I pass to the next grade test?
Yeah.
In a low
Yeah.
stakes environment, you have to give them space to try and see if they do it. You have to give them space to try, and they may
Yeah.
fail. And
Yeah.
sometimes bombing the test might be what they need to be like, oh, I need to try harder. Parents will be
Yeah.
like, I did that, didn't work. This is where you get to, and we have a whole bunch of stuff in the book that we don't have time to go through here, but where you get to sort of diagnosing what is the problem? Why are they not motivated?
Yeah.
What is it? So I'll just take the kids in passenger mode because this is really common. Sometimes they're not motivated because it's too difficult and they are missing some key skills. In which case you do have to kind of figure what those are and help them get those skills. And so they're missing the key skills and they just are really lost. They're outside of their zone of proximal development, which is like the perfect sweet spot where kids are stretched and can learn and accomplish with support. And they just aren't in the zone. Sometimes kids are sort of coasting and not doing it because they're very disorganized and they need some of these executive function skills. And they really just need some coaching on how to organize themselves. So rather than do your homework now, what is your plan for getting your homework
Yeah.
done? I've switched
Yeah.
with my own kids doing this who procrastinate. And we hear a lot about kids getting stuck in this procrastination cycle and parents trying to get them out of it through a command and control. And oftentimes what procrastination is they can't figure out what to do. They don't know how to plan and use their time. And then they feel bad. So they want to escape the feeling, so they procrastinate.
Yeah.
So us
Yeah.
telling them they're bad makes the feeling worse and makes them procrastinate more, sort of nagging and procrastination. You get stuck in this procrastination nagging loop from hell that never works. So helping them learn how to organize their learning can be really helpful. Like, what's your plan for getting the homework done? How much time do you need that? Do you need any help from me? If no, okay. And they're, and they seem to have a plan, back off and let them try. Again,
Yeah.
in a low stakes environment. I wouldn't
Yeah.
suggest doing this,
For the final.
for the final,
Yeah.
for really high stakes thing that are
Yeah.
really going to
Yeah.
make an important
Yeah.
difference for them. But,
Yeah.
Kids have many weeks in a school year. It's okay. And we also say, look, the other piece that I would tell parents is, often the argument, because we certainly have, we interviewed many parents and did a big survey of parents, that is a common concern. And I share that concern and have lived it with my own children. A lot of times parents are trying to get their kids either a great scholarship to a perfect school or into an Ivy League
Yeah.
or into a really
Yeah.
competitive school. And the truth is, most kids are not going to go to those schools by the numbers. Only 3% of the kids who apply are going to go. And that I would say shift your mindset, certainly something I've done. And actually the number one thing that makes kids succeed in college, if this is where parents' focus is how engaged kids are. It's much less about the actual university. And there are many, many good universities across the US, across North America, across the world. Many.
Yeah. The challenge, I guess, especially for parents in the sort of middle and sort of upper middle class, income brackets is that kids' education has become another status symbol, right?
Yeah.
So if I can get my kids into, insert Ivy League, university or of your choice, then then that's, I've succeeded. I'm a great parent. We will, maintain the sort of whatever upward social mobility and what have you. and maybe you should sort of maybe look this up, but there was a study, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that basically found that for kids coming from that income bracket, the university or college or whatever, the ranking of that college made very little difference to their life outcomes.
That's correct.
The privilege and the advantages were already embedded with, just by virtue of being, being born to highly educated parents with, with all the and great jobs with all the advantages that entails, right? And then in fact, getting underprivileged kids into these institutions, now that made a difference, right? Because they could build their social networks.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what have you, right? Again, less to do with the quality of the education, more to do with the kinds of social networks and social capital that you develop, right? Now I was going to say, I don't know how you break that cycle, given that we are so, by nature competitive and status oriented at the species level almost.
I do think that there is a large point you just made, which is it's really is the most disadvantaged kids, really the most disadvantaged, who do shift their life trajectories meaningfully because of the networks and social capital they get by going into an elite higher ed institution. But the vast majority of the rest of the kids, it doesn't make a meaningful difference. And what does make a difference, though, is when they show up to college, do they have explorer muscles? Because in college, there's nobody there telling you exactly what to do to be to get an A and be perfect. You have to figure things out. And we see a lot of kids who have been pushed to the breaking point, get into elite colleges. We interviewed a number of them. We have some of them in our book, and who melted down in college because they don't have explorer muscles and they failed and they didn't know how to do it. We have a wonderful Amina, a wonderful character in the book, who said, who was a total achiever throughout, got into all the Ivy Leagues, actually, went to Yale and struggled and had to take a gap year because she was failing. And she was like, I wish I'd had failure therapy in high school, that I'd been able to fail so I could figure out what I do when I fail, because she was totally flummoxed. And so one thing is to tell parents who, again, let's bracket the most disadvantaged kids. It does make a difference. It is important. Universities should absolutely prioritize funding to support scholarships for those young people. For the rest of them, I think the message to parents is a couple of things. One, kids need explore skills to achieve in college. That is actually what makes them successful in college, is how engaged they are. How do they form relationships with their teachers? Do they go for help? Do they find ways to, again, make all that's on offer to them interesting to themselves and meaningful? So that they need to test that, give them space to test those skills in high school in particular, and middle school, et cetera, sort of junior and senior high school levels in particular, where it's a little more low stakes. Then the second message to parents, I think, who many parents feel trapped in your point about their children's education becoming a status symbol. Many parents don't love it. They just feel pressure from others in their peer group, and they feel trapped. And I think the message is that there's nothing wrong with you. It's not a moral failing on you, individual parent. You're just stuck in an environment where people seem to want to provide accolades for certain things, and sort of call it, university education status is one of them. However, if you actually look at parents' own desire for their kids, it has shifted over time. And this is where you have sort of a public-private problem. Most parents say they actually don't really care where their kid goes. They want them to be successful, and they think that, a top elite college is the path to be successful. But they mostly they want them to be happy and to pursue a good livelihood and have things they're interested in.
Yeah.
But they think everybody else cares about status and money and brand,
Yeah.
when actually it's not true. So I think breaking out of that, having discussions with your parent group, trying to resist the sort of crazy pressure, is, better done collectively.
Rebecca, I mean, this has been an incredibly engaging, no pun intended, conversation. And I know we could probably go on for, for at least another hour, but I'm conscious that, of your time. The book, just to remind everyone, is called The Disengaged Teen, Helping Kids Learn Better, Feel Better, and Live Better. I'll certainly be looking forward to reading it.
Thank you, Stavros.
Thanks
Appreciate
so
it. Lovely
much.
to talk to you. Bye-bye.
Likewise.